Welcome to the Ex Good Girl podcast, the place where people pleasers, perfectionists, and overgivers come to unlearn the good girl rules that you thought were making you good, but now you can see are actually just keeping you small. If you've spent your life being unable to say no, putting everyone else's needs and feelings above your own, constantly seeking external approval, or avoiding conflict to make others feel comfortable, if guilt and resentment feel like a constant weight in your life, it is time to learn to knock that shit off. Every episode, we dive into the stories, skills, and strategies that you need to stop shrinking, start speaking up, and to live a life that is authentically and unapologetically yours, while also deepening the connection and vulnerability in the relationships that matter to you. I'm glad you're here. Let's jump in. True story, Krista St-Germain, you are one of my very most favorite people on the planet. And if you're watching a little clip of this, we match today. So I feel like there's...
Well, it's so ironic because you are one of my favorite people on the planet. So it works.
It
It works
works.
for us.
Krista, we've had a couple of conversations before, one on this podcast about how helpful you were to me during a time of intense grief and how much coaching helped me. You're a coach for a living. You work with women who have recently lost partners. What do you want people to know about, like, why were you drawn to that? Why do you do that work?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't part of any sort of long plan. No, so my husband died, right? So in 2016, swimmingly, life was going swimmingly. And then we took this trip and we came back from that trip. And on the way back, he was trying to change a flat tire on my car and was hit by a drunk driver. And he died, less than a day later. So I didn't really even have grief on the purview at all until I just had my own grief experience. And so much of that was so much harder than it needed to be. And there was a lot more suffering than there needed to be, because what I later learned was that, what I thought I understood about grief was pretty outdated and not very helpful. And so really it just came from this idea that if I could help people with that, they could have an easier experience. I had no idea that the 5 stages of grief wasn't the way that grief went. I really thought that's what it was going to be like. And, there's a lot of other things that I learned too, but yeah, that's why I just wanted people to have better experiences.
So interesting because, man, we humans love some stages, don't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, I get that because it would be nice.
It totally would be nice. Yeah. Yeah. If
But
you just got to, it was very linear. You complete
mhm,
stage one, then you go to stage two, then stage three. You can
yeah,
have a sense of like, I'm making progress. This makes sense. I
yeah.
really understand it. How, how do you think it impacted you to think that there were stages and then to then realize, oh, maybe it doesn't work like this?
Well, I definitely felt some resistance to the idea that it wouldn't work like that, because if there is no end place called acceptance, then what is there? What does that mean? What does that look like? And so it just felt a little too wide open. I would have preferred that it be clearly defined and objective, and it kind of, well, it was not super comfortable for me. And also, personally, I was the type of person who wanted to get the A, you know, and be the star in the class. And so I kind of went into grief like I'm going to show them, like I'm going to do this, and it's going to be the best it's ever been done, and I'm going to read the books and do the things. And so that was kind of disappointing too, because that was where I had found safety in the past, was kind of that performative validated sense, and it just wasn't available. So fairly uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I just can't help but think about, like, grief itself is this unwieldy, there, it feels endless. It feels, for a lot of people, I know it felt like this for me, just like this black pool of bottomlessness that once I go in there, I'm never coming out. And so if there isn't this place called acceptance where I just get to go and that's the end of it, those two things together, like there's no stages where I'm just going to get to some kind of quantifiable, clearly defined end. That would make grief a lot easier, I think, to at least conceptually go into, because you're like, okay, there's this end to it. I'm almost to the end. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
And so if there isn't the end of it, what is there?
Yeah. I think there's a capacity that gets built. There's a capacity to carry it. There's a capacity to feel it. There's a capacity to think about it with intention, to decide who you want to be in it, right? And there's an integration that happens. So we go from not from being sad to being grateful, or sad to being happy, but we go from being sad and believing that we'll fall into the pit of sadness and never come out, to realizing that, oh, I actually can allow the sadness to be there, because it will always be. But we kind of develop a relationship with it, make peace with it. And I do think it gets less intense over time typically. And then we also go from what the hell even happened to me, and I am completely powerless in this, to recognizing that, yes, there are many things I'm powerless about, but also I get to choose what I want to think about this, what I want to make it mean in my life, and who I want to be, given that it happened. I get to use what I went through as a way to kind of inventory my life and the way that I'm living, and make sure I like it. And if I don't, align with, what I value. So it can be still brutal, and also a beautiful opportunity to reconnect with what's important to you and make sure that you're living what matters to you.
I think that is really beautiful, especially because grief usually happens because of something that you didn't choose.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something, this thing that I didn't choose has now changed my life forever. And I do think it makes a lot of sense that there's a feeling of maybe powerlessness, or what the fuck, or just like, how did this happen? And so to be able to find a place, even in that, where there's a choice, deciding who I want to be, having some intention about even how I think about it, that's such a beautiful place to even think about getting to. And I think a lot of the women that I work with who are experiencing grief, it actually brings out at first a lot of their people pleasing tendencies, like performing and pretending and overdoing, as a way to cope with it when they're still in that powerlessness of it. Does that resonate with you?
100%. And yeah, I think about conversations I've had with clients, especially clients who have been in like higher control faiths. The performative nature, I remember somebody telling me a story about having somebody from their ward over to the house. It was like someone in leadership, and I don't remember the position. And I mean, her husband had just died. And it was all about, is the house clean enough, and what are they going to think, and, holding it together. And just you could just feel the amount of pressure that was in her body of trying to make sure that other people were pleased with how she was grieving. And that's pretty sadly common.
Yeah. I'm thinking about conversations that I've had with clients who are in grief, where, this performing or pretending, or like, we just got to keep going, got to keep marching on. And a lot of times it actually just amplifies all of kind of the freneticness, because there's this grief underneath, right? Kind of this like constant underground movement of grief. And then they just try and cover it up and cover it up and cover it up and cover it up with a clean house, with being put together so they look like they're grieving well, or showing up for their kids with lots of activities and distractions, and all of this from a place of like, I think this is the right thing to do. I think this is helpful. I think my children need to know that there's still things, to live for if their father has passed away, or I think my children still need to know that there's things to live for if we are no longer going to the same church we used to go to, or if there's been some other kind of loss in the family. And so it ends up creating just this soup of pressure and exhaustion and overdoing, because I don't think, well, I'll just ask you, why do you think that happens?
I mean, I think it's because we're coping and we're doing the best we can with what we know in the moment.
Yeah.
Like nobody taught us how to do it any other way. And so it makes a whole lot of sense that we would try to outrun the grief or avoid it with, keeping ourselves busy or distracting or any other number of things that work temporarily. So it's like a survival strategy. It's a coping strategy. And for a while, it might be more helpful than not for some people. But I think most people reach a point where they realize, okay, part of me sees that if I don't slow down and let myself feel some of this, I'm going to burn out. It's too much. I'm running myself into the ground. And then there's another part that is quite afraid of slowing down long enough to feel it or deal with whatever's inside. But you start to see the scale kind of tipping in one direction where it's like, I better learn this skill. I better figure this out for myself. Otherwise, the trajectory of burnout and depletion is not good. And then it's time.
Yeah. I also just want to name that I think sometimes, I don't know. Well, first, just in my own experience, I didn't know that what I was feeling was grief, right? I think with the loss of a spouse, that's very obvious. With other losses, it's a little less obvious about why I have this feeling that, maybe feels a little sad, but I shouldn't be feeling it because I'm just thinking of like sneaky grief, or like in some settings, grief makes a lot of sense. Like somebody died, grief, yes. But I think other types of losses, it's like the grief is a little harder to identify.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. So there's someone dying, there's bereavement.
Yeah.
A type of grief. Then there's the broader definition of grief. So a natural human response to a perceived loss. Perceived loss.
Yeah.
So you could be on the tail end of something you absolutely wanted. Like maybe it's been super hard for you to come out to your friends and family, and you finally do it. And you are so proud of yourself for doing it. And so you think, well, I should be happy. I should feel relief. And maybe to some extent you do. But then also what you might find you also feel is grief. You might feel grief because you think you should have done it sooner, or for all the years where you didn't do it and now you're doing it, right? It wasn't the way you wanted your life to go, and now you see that it did, and you lost all of these years where you were being, not your authentic self, right? You expect something to go one way and it goes another. And that's so many things. But the important part is that to you, it feels like a loss.
And I think I love that you said it that way, because I think that for a lot of like my life, people outside of me told me what was valid and not valid, right?
Mm.
I had all of these kind of external authorities, and I think a lot of women can kind of identify with like needing to check with someone else. Is this a valid loss for me to feel bad about? Am I allowed to feel sad about this? Because there is such a habit, a way of life of just making sure that it's okay with other people that I feel this way.
Isn't that wild that we're taught that?
That's crazy.
It's wild, and it makes me sad and angry.
It does. It does. And I think that needing to check with someone else to see if it's okay that I feel this way just adds another layer of separation from it, anxiety about it. And what I would say, and I'm just interested in any of your thoughts, is that if I feel like this is a sad thing, it gets to be a sad thing, and nobody else has to agree with me.
100%. Sometimes people will say, like, what's the thing you really want people to hear? And that's it for me is like, if you could just not ever make yourself wrong for how you feel, I mean, that would solve so many of the challenges that we have, especially as women. We feel
Yes.
something and we make ourselves wrong for it, or we feel something and we don't believe it's okay until somebody else says it is. Or we feel something and we think, well, it was okay for me to feel it for a certain amount of time, but I've passed that time. And so now it's not okay. Now it's a
Yes.
sign of dysfunction or me having done something wrong or something being wrong with me.
Yes. And I see that with grief, right? Like this thing happened X number of years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
should be over it in a different place.
Yeah. Accepting.
Bonkers.
And if I were accepting, I wouldn't feel sad or I wouldn't have feelings about it, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Grief is the natural human response to a perceived loss. And we can't go back and undo the loss. And we're always going to have a response to it. Doesn't it then make sense that we would always have feelings about it?
Yeah.
So we're not trying to change the feelings that we have about it. We're trying to create a greater capacity to support ourselves when those feelings are present so that we can have an easier experience of them and the energy can shift and move. And secondary losses will keep happening forever, right? And a lot of times we can't plan for them. And so if we're trying to measure our success in grief based on how we feel, and we're buying into the idea that we're supposed to feel the emotions on the higher end of the scale, but not the ones on the lower end of the scale, well, then we have no space to have secondary loss experiences, which are such a huge part of grief for most people. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Give me an example of a secondary loss and what you mean
Sure.
by feeling the feelings of the higher end and lower end.
Okay, yeah. So the primary loss is, for my clients that their spouse died. For somebody else, it could be whatever the main loss is. So let's say somebody didn't want to lose a job, right? They wanted to be in that space and they lost that job. That would be the primary loss. A secondary loss would be now I don't get to go to lunch with that one coworker that I love, or our relationship changed because I don't get to see them every day. So that loss, that secondary loss wouldn't have happened without the primary loss having happened. And the thing about secondary losses is that for most people, it's experienced kind of as a death by a thousand paper cuts because, yeah, the primary loss, we expect that one will hurt. And other people give us support around that hurt. But then we keep coming across scenarios in life that are secondary, but still involve grief. So, you know, okay, the spouse died. Now it's wedding day. Spouse isn't there, right? It's birth of a grandchild, spouse isn't there. It's all the things that keep happening where in our mind and in our heart, they should be there and they aren't, or it shouldn't have been this way. And it is. And so those are secondary losses.
I'm so glad that you said that because I think that when we don't understand not making ourselves wrong for whatever that we're feeling, you get to the wedding day of your daughter and spouse isn't there. And instead of allowing what you're feeling to just be right, you beat yourself up. It's been 30 years, or why am I
What's wrong?
like, I need to focus and be happy. What's wrong with me
Yeah.
for
Mm-hmm.
doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then and it's sometimes it's not even just the day of, right? It's all the lead up
Mm-hmm.
of worry about,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be a burden to people. I'm going to be a downer. I don't want, it's so and so special day. I don't want to bring them down. We associate a display of emotion with some sort of character weakness or flaw, which is also so sad.
Yes. And that brings up something I want to get into in just a minute. But before we go there, one of the things that I think is misunderstood about not ever making yourself wrong for how you feel is that that is not the same thing as saying, I want to stay in this feeling, or
Yes.
that this feeling is okay or it's like somehow I live here now. You know,
Yeah.
you can not make yourself wrong for how you're feeling and still learn how to choose how you show up in that feeling, choose to be intentional in how you act. Like, for example, if I'm super angry with my husband, I don't want to stay there. I also don't want to throw things, but I think that sometimes, and I know I used to do this, that if I'm angry, then making myself wrong is the only way I know how to get myself out of it.
Mm-hmm. But it really doesn't even work.
It really doesn't even work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then it's still there, you know? So we just might cover it up or switch gears, but really it didn't actually go away. It didn't get digested.
So how do you help clients learn how to not ever make themselves wrong for how they feel?
I mean, I don't know that anybody's batting 100 here.
Yeah.
Because we're humans. And so perfection maybe doesn't need to be the goal, but it is a lot of practicing of just noticing the subtle ways that I make myself wrong. And then noticing it and then being prepared in advance with something that helps me kind of right that. So of course, like my favorite thing, and I say it and my hand just goes to my heart. And it's like, no, of course I feel this way. Of course, this is what's going on. Not to say that it will always be, but it makes so much sense that it is. Right. So, however it is that I'm feeling, if we can make it make sense and then treat ourselves like it makes sense, that helps.
Yeah. And then, weirdly enough, this is the counterintuitive part. The feeling almost relaxes its grip just a tiny bit. And I find that that's the space that I need to be able to decide, how do I want to show up here?
Yeah.
Because when I'm in the grip of it and it's really tight and I'm fighting it or trying to distract myself from it, it's like I don't even have the space to even be with myself, to ask myself, okay, you're angry. How do you want to show up here?
Yeah.
What would feel good right now?
For me, it's space, it's cognitive ability. Like I can't even really get clarity on what's going on, let alone decide who I want to be in it if the emotion is super intense. I need a way to make sure that I feel safe in my body, and I need a way to normalize what I'm feeling and let it flow through. So, tapping is a huge tool that I tend to gravitate towards. And what I love about it is that, well, I mean, I love so many things about it, but one of the things I really love about it is that as you're speaking, you are normalizing what you feel and saying it and following it up with a statement that is accepting of how you feel. And then that energy gets to shift and move, and you can think again, and you can decide then, now what, and who do I want to be, and what do I want next. And it feels completely different than trying to white knuckle your way through
And you're talking about
talking yourself out of how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're talking about EFT, emotion
Mm-hmm.
freedom tapping. And
Mm-hmm.
we both have our favorite tapping practitioner, Melanie Fay.
We love some Melanie
We
Fay.
love some Melanie Fay. So
Yeah.
if tapping is if you're curious about that, check out Melanie Fay, Fay. When you were talking about the secondary losses and kind of how they stack up and the wedding and kind of that scenario, one of the things that came to my mind is how often I am with someone who's in grief and I feel like I don't know what to say sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all want to be of comfort. We all want to be loving. Well, maybe not everybody, but I think the people listening to this podcast want to be, right? And so, what is it about our experience of grief, of other people's grief, that makes it so uncomfortable? And then, how do we actually show up for other people in a way that that is helpful. I just remember I just read a blog post by a woman who just lost her wife. And she said, please do not ask me, how are you doing? Please do not ask me that.
Such a hard question.
Yeah. And so, first of all, what is it about it that makes it so uncomfortable for us? And then how do we show up for people we love?
Yeah. I actually just recorded an episode of my podcast called What to Say and What Not to Say to a New Widow. And it has blown me away, the feedback that I'm getting on it, because it is such a struggle that people have. And it's such a frustration when they are the one in grief, to have so many strange things that are usually well-intentioned, be said to them. So some general ideas. I think one, we weren't taught. Just nobody helped us, right? So how we're expected to exercise a muscle that never got developed. It's such an unfair ask. So we should show ourselves some grace about that. We also have been taught to believe that emotions are problems that need to be fixed. So we often don't have a very big capacity to feel uncomfortable or to be with somebody else who feels uncomfortable. We perceive that as a problem, and we have a righting reflex that says, I need to make them feel better. I can't feel good until they feel better, or something has gone wrong if they don't feel good. Many of the things that people say that are received as dismissive come from that space. They're in a better place. At least they're no longer suffering. You're young. You'll find someone else. Be grateful for the time that you had. At least you know what love is. Like all of these things that I know the look on your face is priceless. People mean well, but wow. So if we could come from the approach that says feelings aren't problems to be fixed, they're just experiences to be allowed or witnessed, and we could be with someone as they feel, however it is they feel, because we aren't deciding that it should be some other way. That's what most people respond well to, is just someone who doesn't believe they're broken and isn't trying to fix them, who believes that, no, this is what grief is like. And of course, and while I'm so sorry and I love you, this sucks. And I'm not going to try to take it away from you or minimize it or make you find some sort of silver lining, because it just doesn't feel right.
I think hopefully I've never said it. I mean, who knows? Back in my super religious days, I think I heard a lot of crazy things like God needed them in heaven and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. I think where I kind of get tripped up is I want the right words that are not going to like make it worse or not going to remind them of something painful, and it just feels, it feels like
Yeah, I think we want to reframe that and say that your words about their loss did not remind them. They did not forget.
yeah.
Your words remind them that you did not forget. And typically that is well received,
Yeah.
because they are probably feeling much more alone in their
Yeah.
grief than you expect that they are. And they might be looking like they're doing really good. And they're putting on the brave face, or they look okay. And so it's easy to think, well, they're doing so great. I don't want to remind them. No, they didn't forget, but they might think that you did.
Yeah. I chuckled for just a second because when you said, "Oh no, they didn't forget," it was kind of like, "Yeah, duh."
Mm-hmm.
I would think that my words would suddenly just remind them out of the blue of this horrible thing that's
No,
happened to
but I
them.
I used to think the same thing too, though. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a pretty human thing. And I also encourage, if we're talking about somebody who actually died, I encourage people to say that person's name,
yeah,
bring them up, because again, it's a way of saying I didn't forget and showing interest. People typically like to talk about, not universally, but often they like to talk about their person or tell stories. What were they like, or what made you laugh about them, or tell me a funny story, or
yeah,
if there's a moment where it reminds you of that person, yeah, say it. That used to
yeah,
happen to me all the time at work, because Hugo and I worked together. And
yeah,
so everybody at work knew him. Some
yeah,
of them had worked with him for 10 years longer than me. And there would be the perfect moment where they could crack a Hugo joke, but you could see the hesitation,
yeah,
right? Because they're afraid of hurting me. And so
yeah.
I just decided, okay, maybe I need to crack the joke. Maybe I need to bring it up. And then it's like, okay, now that's what she wants. She wants to talk about him. She wants us to say the obvious thing.
I love that there's so many things that feel almost counterintuitive because we've been taught, like, don't talk about it, don't say it. But I just had a friend who posted on Facebook about the loss of her dad, who was well known. And she just said, I'd love to hear any memories you have with my dad. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to keep all of that alive and present. And so, yeah, they are feeling likely much more alone than we might guess. And I think I love what you said, that our words remind them that we haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is there anything that you haven't gotten to say during our conversation that you really want to make sure you include as part of this?
Well, we had talked a little bit before about showing grief,
Mm,
especially as a parent,
yeah,
and how sometimes we have this inclination to hide our grief from our kids.
yeah,
And I get that, and I actually had some of that myself. And what I've seen in my clients is part of the reason grief is so hard from the get-go is because it wasn't normalized for us. And so then we come into our own grief experience. And if we haven't had some good role models of how to actually, cry those tears and be okay, or do what we need to do to process those feelings, talk about it, and be okay. It's not the elephant in the room. Then we might think that's the way to do it, and without really realizing that we're perpetuating accidentally the cycle that's made our grief hard. And so I think if we can show and be honest, maybe not like tsunami style wailing that might scare a child, but to actually show them that it is okay and healthy to have feelings and to cry
yeah,
and to be sad and to articulate that. If it's a mom, I used to tell my kids all the time, mommy's sad and it's okay to be sad. Mommy's crying and it's okay to cry. It's always
yeah.
okay. And I'll be okay. I am okay. And I'm sad, you know? And so if you're worried about doing damage to your kids because you're having an intense grief experience and you're inclined to hide it, I would offer that sometimes more damage is done by hiding it. And can we find ways to let them in on it so that we can role model it in healthy ways? My
It's so
daughter,
interesting. Go ahead.
oh,
No,
well, I was just reminded of my daughter. She was home for the weekend and we were playing this little card game. And the question was something like, when did you first realize that I was human towards a parent? And she made a comment that it was her walking into the living room and seeing me crying. And I was watching a TV show or something. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, you said something like like very like what you would normally say. And I'm like, oh God, what's that? What would I normally say? And she was like, well, like, it's okay to cry, like, and I'm like, okay, good. That's what I wanted you to hear. I'm so glad, she's 22, but I'm so glad that back then I normalize that for her because it's obvious. It feels so obvious for her to say it to me now. And if we could do more of that.
yeah, so good. When you're talking about that, it's just bringing up for me, I think, like when I talk about people pleasers, everyone kind of thinks of the very classic people pleaser who's maybe very high strung and anxious and checking on everybody. Are you okay? Can I get you anything?
Mm,
And I think those, if we're speaking in just broad generalities, that type of person doesn't want their feelings to inconvenience anyone, right? They
mhm,
don't want to have any needs that are inconvenient for anyone, or that take up any space, or that take up anyone else's time, because you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be inconvenient or a burden for anyone. And I think there's another maybe personality profile that is also doing some people pleasing, but it looks very different. They're very strong, they're very armored up. And they're like, I don't need anyone. I can do it all myself. I don't need help. I can rely on myself. And they might be more inclined to push those feelings down in the name of being strong, being sturdy, being super resilient, because that's kind of the way they've gotten through everything, is
mhm.
by only relying on themselves, not needing any other help. And so whether, you're listening to this and you feel like I'm more of the strong, independent, armored up, or I'm more of the, anxious, checking in on everybody all the time, being able to feel that and to not kind of gloss over those feelings is what is going to be the thing that ultimately, counterintuitively, helps you feel so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to a certain extent, I still feel myself going through some of that. Enneagram 3. I'm
Yes.
not, hugely familiar with the Enneagram, but have been using it as a tool lately and just realizing, a lot of my, validation from others has been because of independence and accomplishment and achievement. And it's not super comfortable to be vulnerable and, to find spaces where I feel safe enough to do that. And the more I see it in myself, the more I can see it in others too,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's uncommon at all.
No, it's not. Enneagram is a really fascinating way of just kind of learning more about what motivates you, what scares you, kind of how you like to move through the world, how you like to be seen. And yeah, I'm an Enneagram 8.
Oh, the challenger.
Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't
So
surprise me actually knowing you. Yeah.
has its ups and downs.
Well, I bet people know, they know what they're going to get around you if you,
Most of the
yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird though, because being an Enneagram 8 who is a people pleaser, I think that just created,
Mm.
tons of that pretending and performing that we've been talking about. But
Mm-hmm.
so if people are interested, Krista, in what you've had to say, which is brilliant, and you should be interested, take it from me. Where can they find out more about you? What do you have coming up?
Yeah.
Tell
So
me
I
everything.
have a podcast as well. It's called the Widowed Mom Podcast. And I realize that people are listening and going, but I'm not a widow. It's totally fine if they're interested in learning about grief. Just forget the widow part. You can just come and listen for grief. Also on YouTube with that now these days. And then if you know any widows, I'm doing a free online event on November 18th. It'll be 3 days, three days, 3 tools that I will teach to help make the holidays easier. I realize we can't really make the holidays easy, but I do believe that the right tools can make them easier. And so they can register for that.
Awesome. All of that will be in the show notes, so you can
Perfect.
find it there. Krista, you've just been someone who I have relied on for lots of years to be
Mm,
a voice, not just of wisdom, but of just like so much compassion. And that's what I
Thank you.
hear coming through this, is just not ever letting yourself be wrong for what you feel, and
Yeah.
treating yourself with so much gentleness and kindness. And of course, I'm feeling that way with
Mm-hmm.
your hands on your chest. And I just really appreciate knowing that you
Thank
are
you.
there as a friend and there as a guide for women who are
Yeah.
experiencing a lot of grief over the loss
Yeah.
of
And
a
the
partner.
more I do this work, the more convinced I am that compassion is what we need.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
100%.
thank you for this conversation.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening. If this podcast has been helpful to you, I would really appreciate it if you would give me a 5-star rating in whatever platform you listen to your podcast. And if you go to my website, sarahfisk.coach, you can sign up there to receive my emails. Right now, I'm taking private one-to-one clients who want my help speeding up this work in their own lives. I really hope to provide a lot of free information on my website and in my podcast for people to do this work on their own. But if you're interested in having a coach like me to help you implement these things faster, to find the blind spots and obstacles that you're not aware of, go to my website and sign up for a consult. That's a time when you and I can get on Zoom and talk about the particulars of your situation, and I can show you how I could be helpful. The second thing you can do on my website is sign up for a freebie that I have called Difficult Conversations. Having a conversation that seems like it's going to be hard or difficult is one of the things that people pleasers struggle with. And so I've created a whole guide for you to be able to do that with some more confidence. That will also get you signed up for information about my group program, Stop People Pleasing. It's a group coaching program where you join a community of women just like you who are struggling to overcome perfectionating and people pleasing, and we do it together in a group. It's a really amazing opportunity to not just learn from your own experience, but just to see how similar you are to so many other women out there. The healing and the challenging and the laughing and the growth that happens in that beautiful community of women is really amazing. And if it's interesting to you, I would love for you to know about it.